Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit and welcome to this week's episode. I'm going to be sharing some contemplations, reflections, and thoughts about the astrology and the energy of the coming week. And my invitation, as always, is for you to tune inwards and to feel into what wisdom your body, your heart, and your spirit may want to share with you as you are listening to my words. So this is for the week of May 6, 2024, and really, we only have one day within the week that has astrological events, and that is on Tuesday, the 7th, we have Sun in Taurus sextiling Saturn in Pisces, and then we have a new moon in Taurus that is co-present with Venus, Jupiter, and Uranus. And so this is always so exciting to me. I love new moons that don't get a lot of aspects, and especially because of the quietness of the astrological aspects surrounding this new moon, I think there's an energy of clarity that can come through. There is an opportunity, because this is Taurus, for us to be digesting everything that's been coming up. We are coming out of a pretty intense time astrologically, right? We just came out of Mercury being retrograde and exiting shadow period. We just had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Venus and Mars both entered their domicile territories, right? Their domicile signs. And so this is a very fecund time, I think, astrologically in general. So whenever we don't have a lot of astrological aspects in a week, it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of astrology, right? Obviously, there's all of this other context that we're kind of coming into. But to me, there may be a quietness in terms of activation, in terms of kind of new stuff coming up and out. And there's an opportunity here to be really focusing in on not just processing, but prioritizing what matters to us. I know that I feel like this message has been continuing to come back as I'm sitting with the astrology, as I'm sitting with my guides and the guides of this podcast. This idea of prioritizing has been coming up a lot. And so you'll see that that theme is again revisited in this coming week in a slightly new way. So what I want to do is actually to pull a few cards. I specifically want to focus this contemplation on the sun and the moon. The sun represents our spirit, our inspiration, the core of who we are, and the moon represents the body, right? The moon represents the material reality and the ways in which the moon to me is this bridge, right, that brings in inspiration into material form. There's something about the moon that is related to concepts like manifestation and embodiment, right? And so it feels to me like that would be really helpful in terms of thinking about the new moon. The new moon is a period that is often associated with seeding something new, with giving the soul soil some space to receive the seeds that want to be birthed later, right, in the larger cycle. And I also pulled a couple extra cards for Venus and for Saturn, because Venus is the planet that rules both the sun and the moon for this new moon, and Saturn sextiles the new moon. Okay, so let's begin with the sun. So the card that I pulled from the tarot, and this is from the Serpent Fire Tarot by Devaney Amber Wolf, is the Seven of Swords. And so my sense is that in the realm of inspiration, in the realm of ideas, there are many options that we are currently looking at. This can also play out in the realm of relationship. This can play out in the realm of opportunities. But it seems to me that when we really tune in to the heart space, there is one thing that's more important to us than the others. However, it may feel like the process of affirming that, yes, indeed, this matters to me, perhaps more so than the others, is quite challenging at the moment. The sun is the center of the gravity in the solar system. The sun is the force around which all other forces are coalescing. And when we are in our solar power, we move through the world from a place of deep knowing, from a kind of clarity that can really only come from being in touch with that deep knowing, trusting that knowing, and then giving ourselves a big permission slip to be guided by that knowing on a moment-to-moment basis. When we think about this solar power that all of us possess, that is really our birthright, this is not really about creating a big dream so that we can be validated by metrics of society, right? There may be aspects of that are true for us in our path, but really this is about answering to our soul's calling, right? And our soul's calling, just like our nature, is deeply multidimensional. There's something about our soul's calling that may move through a period of ebbs and flows, that may go through many different iterations, that may show different faces to us. And yet, the core of that soul's calling is often very singular. And it may be something so profound, but also so simple to the mind, right? So simple to the thinking mind that it's easy to miss. For example, something that became really apparent to me recently is how throughout my life I have always experienced the love of what I'm calling as the entity of the grandmother. And this is obviously exemplified in my own relationship with one of my human grandmothers, right? But throughout, if I look at the different mentors, the different opportunities that came to me, this figure, this archetype, this force of the grandmother has always been there. And so this recognition on a deeper soul level for me that my purpose in life is really to allow that love of the grandmother to be experienced by everybody who comes across me and my path, and whatever my art looks like at that moment almost seems too obvious. Like it's so easy to miss, because the moment I recognized that, it was like, duh, like that was always there, you know? But it doesn't mean that just because something has been there all along and something has been this constant thread and this constant theme that allows everything else to coalesce around it, right? Just like the sun having this gravitational pull that brings all the other planets in orbit around it, right? Doesn't mean that it's not significant. But it can feel a little challenging to affirm that, because we've been so used to it. It's like thinking about gravity, right? Gravity is such a reality for us living on Earth that we almost don't think about it, right? Gravity is kind of the last thing we think about until we have to think about gravity for one reason or another. Another example that may be interesting to consider is the kinds of practices that have held us together. And some of these practices may be so deeply ingrained in who we are and how we see ourselves that we don't even know the impact of some of these practices until we stop doing them. For me, the center of my being is really my spiritual and my art practices. When I'm not making art, when I'm not communicating with and allowing myself to be inspired by spirit, to be living in that voice of the spirit, all other areas of my life suffer. Even if I may think that there are other important priorities, it's often very detrimental, it's often distracting, it's often destructive to other areas of life, to those people, to those projects, when I don't properly nourish myself with making art and connecting with spirit, which to me are kind of one and the same. There's a way in which when I tune into the inspiration that spirit wants to share with me, what comes out of it is just art, right? So the invitation here is, can you give this solar center of your being the attention that it deserves, and then allow all the other non-essential things to dim or at least to take a backseat? In other words, what matters most to you at this time in your life? There are a few different inquiries and techniques you can employ to figure this out. So I'm going to share some that may inspire you to feel into what practices may be helpful for you. So one that I see have worked very well in my life and the lives of those around me is to take ourselves out of the present moment. And you can either do this with the future or with the past. So one way to do this is if you look at the future, or rather if you look at this current moment from the perspective of the future, you may want to ask yourself, when I look back at this time that I'm currently in, what would me in the future wish the current version of me had focused on, right? And you can also do this with the past. You can ask, what would a younger version of me wish I would do with my current circumstances and with the resources that are currently at my disposal? So this is, to me, a profound practice. And I want to remind you that this isn't really about getting out of the present moment. This practice is about creating space, especially if you've been feeling stuck in a specific way of looking at and being with yourself in the present moment. Sometimes we are not able to be fully present because we are so merged and we are so enmeshed with our current situation. And this technique for me helps give me a little bit of neutrality and helps give me a little bit of space and distance. And it gives me an opportunity to look at my current situation in the ways that I may not be able to access without creating that artificial distance, right? It's a technique that's especially great if you feel like you are lacking perspective. And you can also break this down into smaller steps, right? Sometimes when I look back at the past or I go into the future, what I'm seeing as what is the important thing for me to focus on in this present moment can get so nebulous and so large. And it's always okay to scale things down a little bit. If your intuition is giving you something really major, like bring peace to the world, or something like that, you may want to ask more information about what you can do in this present moment. What are some of the actionable steps, which may include shifting the way that you perceive yourself, right? Or changing what you're eating in the morning, or changing the time that you go to bed, right? Like little things like that can really give us more resources so that we can be more fully present to what is actually important to us. Sometimes our intuition speaks to us in these very mundane ways, and it invites us into deepening our relationship with the things that seem to be very small and perhaps insignificant, so that we can see the bigger picture. Another technique I like to share around feeling into what matters to us at this time in our lives is to look at our options, right? We can give ourselves the permission to look at all the possibilities as distinct elements rather than an undifferentiated whole, which can feel absolutely overwhelming. So for me, what I like to do is I take out a piece of paper, and for me, I always use scrap paper because I like to make a mess. And then I write out all the possibilities, right? I write out all the things that I'm currently doing, all the things I'm thinking about, all the things that matter to me. And we're all a little different. For me, I tend to have too many ideas. I tend to focus on too many things, right? And to me, the sun in Taurus is about, okay, if you want to slow down, you have to reduce the number of things that you are doing, because you can't slow down if you are doing a million things each day, right? And so what I found is having it laid out visually always helps me personally. Even just the act of committing it all to paper and just writing out all the things that are currently present in my life, the things that I'm concerned about, the things that I'm doing, the things that I'm spending my energy or my time on, even just having them laid out, it's very clear to me once I take a step back and look at what I wrote. Oh, these are the important pieces, right? All these other things are perhaps less important or less relevant at this time, right? They may be important in the long run, but they may not be totally relevant at this time. An example may be a project that really matters a lot to me, but maybe I'm not feeling deeply inspired to work on this project. What is the point of continuing to show up every day with a project that I know I'm not inspired by, right? Not that there is a resistance, but maybe if I go deeper, I can just feel that this is not the season for this particular project. It's actually much more beneficial to walk away, right? Another way you can do this, if you are a verbal processor, is to talk it out with a friend that you trust to hold neutral space for you. Notice what's on your list, right? And as you are sharing this with a friend, as you are putting it into a piece of paper, notice how your body is feeling. Are you drawn to certain things? Are you feeling curious about spending more time doing something that you just wrote or you're just telling your friend about? Are you feeling repulsions towards certain items on that list? Are you feeling forward momentum? Or are you maybe feeling a lot of shoulds, right? That I should be doing this. I should care about this. The point here is to slow down the thought processes. Often overwhelm comes when our thoughts are moving too quickly, or they are too vast and too large for us to process and break down into digestible pieces. Something that I think about a lot when it comes to Taurus is the other earth sign, which is Virgo, right? Virgo is the mutable earth and Taurus is the fixed earth. And I often think about the relationship between Taurus and Virgo and how there's this beautiful synergistic quality between them. Taurus tends to know the direction where it's going. If we think about the zodiac as related to animals, Taurus is related to the bull, right? The bull has energy, the bull has power, and once the bull is set into a particular direction, the bull doesn't care about rain or shine, right? The bull just goes there. But when I think about Virgo, I think about the process of refining, the process of harvesting, the process of even maybe drying out some herbs, right? So that we can turn it into a different form. Or fermentation to me is very Virgo as a process, right? Composting is very Virgo. There's something about Virgo that has to do with breaking things down that is really, really helpful to the part of us that is Taurus, where Taurus has a clear direction and also has this large reserve of energy to pour into for something that is maybe going to take a long time to materialize, right? Taurus brings in the resonance, Taurus brings in the energy, Taurus brings in the stamina. Virgo brings in the ability to break things down so that we're not stuck in a kind of system overwhelm, right? Without breaking things down, things are often impossible for us to digest. And so what I want to end with here with regards to the sun is a reminder that it takes courage to give ourselves the gift of focus. Focus requires decisions to be made, and choosing to focus is one of the most potent form of self-care. It helps weed things out that are not immediate, that are not urgent, that are not fully relevant to the goals that are pertinent to this current moment. And so giving ourselves permission to really focus on the things that matter to us can feel like such a relief, right? And this brings me into the card that I pulled for Venus, which is the Eight of Wands. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but really quickly, what I'm sensing as the fruit of doing the solar work, of feeling into what really matters to me and then allowing ourselves to be pulled and to be guided in that direction, is that we access a certain momentum that is only available when we are doing the things that we deeply love and that we currently have energy for, that there's flow that's helping us get closer to wherever we need to go with this particular endeavor, right? When I'm thinking about Venus and Taurus, first of all, Venus and Taurus is domicile, right? So Venus has all the resources that she needs in order to fulfill her agenda. And the agenda of Venus, obviously, is harmony. Venus is interested in pleasure. Venus is interested in making art. Venus is interested in also procreation. And I don't just mean that physically, although it absolutely can be. I also mean that creatively. Venus rejoices in the fifth house, right, of pleasure and children and creative self-expression. So there's a quality here that to me is promised when we allow ourselves to focus on what really matters to us, that there's a certain level of relief that comes in. We get to really enjoy the pace of life that often is medium to slow. This is something that I've heard one of my Qigong teachers said, that the pace of life and the pace of nature is always slow to medium. It doesn't rush, right? Nature doesn't really rush. And so, to me, paradoxically, when we allow ourselves to focus, we allow more flow to come in. And when there's more flow, there's actually more movement. There's actually maybe even more progress on the surface level. that we can access. So let's talk about the moon. So the moon, as I mentioned, speaks to the body, right? And the transmissions that I'm receiving for the moon feels more esoteric. It feels more abstract. It feels like it's actually happening more on a subconscious level. This is interesting because this is reminding me of something that came through the last time I was facilitating Eyes on the Edge, which is one of my courses, which is that sometimes when we inquire or communicate with the body, the information that we get isn't always intellectual, isn't always verbal, and that's totally okay. That when we engage in intuitive practices that are maybe more spirit-based, we can tend to receive a lot of information, like a fountain of information kind of opens up. But when we connect with the body, often what we get are sensations, very subtle. And some of these sensations don't even totally make sense. For some of us, maybe we make the connections with our minds, and for others, these sensations are to be felt, right? And so let's talk about the card that is coming up for the moon, which is the Two of Pentacles. And I'm going to also take a photo of these cards and share it with you so you can take a look at them if you want to. There's a mythical, paradoxical quality to the moon in Taurus. Taurus is where the moon is exalted, and so the moon holds a certain primacy here. The moon has access to resources that it may not otherwise have. And especially when we're thinking about a new moon, where the sun and the moon are conjunct one another, we can even go to say that at least when we're thinking about astrological theory, the moon for this particular new moon cycle may be more powerful, may be more resourced than the sun, right? The sun is neutral in Taurus. The nature of the moon is to nurture, is to care, and to materialize. The moon is the fastest moving celestial object in astrology, right? When we look at the moon moving through the chart, we can see that the moon visits every single point in the chart every 28 days, right? And so the moon carries a certain transience while also being rooted in a predictable rhythm. There's a steady cyclicality to the moon. We can consider this dual nature of the moon being both transient and rhythmic through our experience with the moon from the perspective of Earth, right? If we look up at the full moon, we know for a fact that within 28 days, the moon will return to its fullness. At the same time, if you go night after night to look at the moon, it continues to change, right? So if you look at the moon from the smaller window of time, it almost seems like, wow, today I don't see the moon at all. And then I start to see it peeking through the sky. And before I know it, it's growing into its fullness, right? There's an ever-changing quality to the moon, but within that, there's also predictability. And so one way I think about the moon being exalted in Taurus is to consider the modality and the element of Taurus, which is fixed earth. Fixed earth to me means doubly fixed, right? Earth is the slowest of the four elements we have in astrology. Earth can move very, very slowly. And so when we think of the moon in Taurus, we can think of the moon having a certain access to stability, right? What happens when you mix this attuned, nurturing quality of the moon with the stability of fixed earth that Taurus brings is it opens up pathways for fertile ground upon which things, relationships, projects, ideas can really take place, right? So the Two of Pentacles for the moon in Taurus, to kind of bring in our card here, is is making me think about the yin-yang principle. When we look at the symbol of the yin-yang, we see the primordial nothingness, yin, as being the birthplace of activity and manifestation, yang, right? And likewise, when we see the busyness, the dynamism of yang, it's also where there will come, or there will be birth, a need to rest, right? Which is yin. So the Two of Pentacles asks us to question our relationship with comfort. There's something about the exalted moon in Taurus where I think it can be quite tricky, because this placement is really keyed in to high standards of care, high standards of nurture. And therefore, the moon in Taurus can be so aware of all of the instances when those standards are not met. But it's important to remember with the moon in Taurus that growth doesn't necessarily come from comfort. There's a difference between comfort and nurture. This is, for me, really an important distinction, because sometimes true nurturance can look like stripping away certain comforts, and we can allow ourselves a period of kicking and screaming a little bit, right? Throwing some tantrums because we don't like having these comforts stripped away from us. An example to consider is from my own previous lifetime as a classical musician, which was when I was performing or training for a performance, for a concert, say, or a recital. It may be comfortable to continue playing the pieces I'm about to perform in a practice room all by myself. I've been practicing it in private, right? And it's so nice to just kind of go over it again and again and again. But the reality is that the performance happens in front of an audience, right? The definition of a performance is literally this commingling of the performer, what is being performed, and the audience, right? So if I'm only practicing in a practice room by myself, I am missing a really crucial element of a performance. So what I found to be helpful, to be nurturing, is to practice and get my level of fluency with the piece to the best level that I can, and then actually to invite some friends or colleagues or teachers to look at me play the piece. Because it certainly does throw off the energetics enough that I'm shown the places where I'm not actually totally prepared, where I lose a little bit of my focus, right? So in that sense, something that I feel is wanting to be spoken through this Two of Pentacles is really contemplating places where we are over-reliant on keeping the status quo for our comfort. And where are we not allowing ourselves to grow? Where are we stifling our own growth because we are so afraid of making changes that may impact our comfort? And to me, there's a little bit of a discomfort here, pun intended, that we'll have to kind of go through, because as we get out of our comfort zone, oftentimes we need to be in a process of trial and error, right? This new moon in Taurus feels like a really important time to recommit to that which we care about. As we already mentioned in the solar portion of this contemplation, there's an invitation here to really focus on the things that matter to us, right? And then part of what we need to do, or the kinds of conversations we might want to have with the body, is where am I holding on to certain comforts that are actually in the long run may not be the most nurturing thing for me? Where might I need to be weaning off some of these comfortable elements, not in a masochistic way, right? But in a way that is deeply aware and deeply in touch with what is needed for us to step into the next chapter of our soul's journey. I want to bring in also Saturn here, because the other card that I haven't talked about is the Queen of Pentacles, which I pull for Saturn. There's something here about the idea of composting. I was recently reading about Saturn in Pisces, which is the Saturn we currently have in the living sky. And Sasha Ravich talked about Saturn in Pisces as related to the ocean as the Earth's largest cemetery. And this really captivated my imagination. It made me think about this idea I've heard from science that water has never really left Earth, right? Water has been here pretty much since time immemorial and just keeps getting recycled one way or another, and purified and polluted, right? But then kind of taken back into the cradle of the earth to be recycled or repurposed into some other form. And so, to me, what feels powerful to consider here is thinking about Saturn in Pisces as leading us to the places where we have released certain attachments to certain outcomes, which in turn help us more deeply be with the essence of the dreams that we have. Whenever we're talking about Pisces, there's always a quality about Pisces that is about dreams, that is about a higher ideal. Pisces is the realm of Jupiter, traditionally, right? And so Saturn in Pisces to me is asking, where might we want to bring in limitation to that which is inherently unlimited, right? There's something so practical about our dreams, because our dreams are pointers for us to show us what's important and what's not important. We are able to dream because these dreams already exist on a frequency level, right? One of the things that can be so challenging about being a dreamer or being a visionary is that you may look around and see that other people are not doing it the way that you are. But that doesn't mean that the dream itself or the vision itself is not already existent on some level. And so to me, Queen of Pentacles is about remembering the ancientness of your dreams. There's that one passage, I believe this was in Ecclesiastes. I don't remember the exact book from which this came from, but this idea of there's nothing new under the sun, right? And that can sound really pessimistic, but I think that is definitely a Saturn slogan. And when we see it from a different lens, it's also deeply empowering, because there's something about looking at our dreams and asking reality to give us confirmation that our dreams are indeed already existent, right? In some shape or form that can be so deeply supportive to this process that the moon invites us into of getting outside of our comfort zone in order to find truer, deeper nourishment. So I think that's it from me by way of contemplations. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I am wishing you a beautiful new moon. Take a lot of rest, hydrate yourself, and if any of you would like to receive a reading sometime in May or later in June, I have some availability and I would love to read for you. I would love to deepen your understanding of your chart or what's happening with you on a transit level, or to do some divination sessions or some subtle alchemy sessions. Recently, I've been really enjoying doing these subtle alchemy sessions, which is my own unique blend of energy work, hypnosis, and Akashic work. And so if any of these are calling to you, I would love to see you. I would love to hold space for you. And yeah, until next time, I hope that this coming week is gentle and nourishing for you. All right, take care.